St. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This past summer, on July 7th, a mother of two young children, Carolina Hubner Muckrat, was fatally shot by a stray bullet from a gunfight between drug dealers near a so-called safe injection site in Leslieville, just east of downtown Toronto. The alleged suspect who was responsible for her death was out on bail at the time. He was also banned from possessing weapons and was obviously not allowed to deal illegal drugs. So a man out on bail, involved in a drug deal gone wrong, got into a gunfight with another drug dealer, and a mother of two young children was shot to death in Toronto. Just the other day, on September 14th, a man who had been charged with first-degree murder for gunning down a person sitting in their car pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was out on bail following that. He is now wanted on a second charge of homicide, so killing someone else when he was out on bail. On June 14th, in southwest Edmonton, a man shot multiple rounds, killing another man in a back alley. At the time of this murder, he was wanted by police for failing to attend a sentencing hearing for murdering another person in July 2020. After pleading guilty of manslaughter for that murder, he was let out on bail, then failed to appear in court and murdered someone else. So again, murderers being let out on bail and murdering more people, all in the past number of months. Also in June, a video went viral. I'm sure you probably saw this, Mr. Speaker. No number of us did. It was very alarming and disturbing. A video went viral online of a man stabbing another man multiple times on a subway in Toronto. The suspect, who has been charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, assault with a weapon, and 2 counts of failing to comply with a release order, was out on bail at the time. So just riding the subway, I've taken the public transit and the subway in Montreal and in other cities on multiple occasions, to think that you could be sitting next to someone who is out on bail for violent crime, like this man who stabbed this other man multiple times. That is not something that Canadians deserve to deal with every day. That is not something I think Canadians thought that they would ever have to deal with. And yet, if you read the news on a regular basis, you know that assaults, stabbings, shootings, murders inside and outside public transit have become, unfortunately, the norm in many parts of our great nation, Mr. Speaker. In August, I'll just wrap up with a few more examples, because I could go on all day. We've all heard them. We've all read them. It's endless. But in August, news broke that a man accused of 4 cold cases of sexual assault in Vancouver was released shortly after being charged. So a rapist, 4 counts of rape or sexual assaults, released on bail into the community. Could be walking among us, released on bail. I didn't realize that Canada had become like this, Mr. Speaker. And when researching for today, it was tale after tale. Violence against women, murders, shootings, stabbings, physical assaults, over and over and over again. And the crime stats back this up. So it's not just in our head. We're not just paying more attention now to the news or social media. Not that we can get the news on social media anymore, thanks to this Liberal government, Mr. Speaker. But certainly the stats from Stats Canada itself backs this up. In fact, since the Liberals formed government in 2015, violent crime has gone up 39%. 39%. Murders are up 43%. Gang-related homicides are up over 108%. Since 2015. Violent gun crime is up 101%. And again, this is in light of legislation and OIC and legislation of so-called gun control going after law-abiding hunters and sport shooters in this country that they've promised will end gun violence in this country. After all of that effort and all of that division, gun crime is up over 100% under their watch in the 8 years that they've been in power, Mr. Speaker. Obviously a very failed approach to addressing violent gun crime in this country. Sexual assaults are up 71% again, this is a feminist government, as they say, at every opportunity. Sexual assault, we know these are mostly against women. 71% increase in sexual assaults since 2015. And the next stat is difficult to say, but sex crimes against children are up 126% since 2015.
Unreal.
And then, of course, car thefts are up 34%, pales in comparison to sex crimes against children. But we hear as MPs, car thefts are through the roof, especially in major cities. You can't leave your car outside. Even in your garage, there's devices to steal them now. So we hear this over and over and over again. And I'll remind the House that of the 44 shooting-related homicides in Toronto last year, 17 of them 17 of the accused were out on bail at the time. In Vancouver, the same 40 offenders were arrested 6,000 times. 6,000 interactions with police in 1 year from 40 people. The people of Vancouver deserve far better, Mr. Speaker. Why can't we do something with those 40 people that are causing mayhem, that are causing hardship, that are causing assaults and harms and rapes and thefts and abuse? Why is it that they continue to walk free time and time and time again? And even more troubling, the overall severity of crime in Canada, tracked by the Violent Crime Severity Index, has increased by nearly 30% under the Liberal government during their 8 years. And I'll remind the House again that under Prime Minister Stephen Harper, the same metric fell by 25%. It was down 25%, now it's back up 30% under the Liberal approach. And for my constituents in Winnipeg, crime is one of the top things I hear from them. It's not just in their heads. In fact, since 2015, violent criminal code violations increased from 9,400 in 2015 to over 14,000 last year. 9,400 in 2015 when they took the wheel, the Liberal government took over 14,000 8 years later. The stats speak for themselves, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal approach to dealing with public safety and violent crime is failing Canadians. Actually, it's costing lives, as we have seen. So this is not just a partisan issue. This is not just a difference of ideology. This is really the safety and security of women, of children, of the elderly, of people riding public transit, of men and women who are just going about their day. So it's very important that we're having this discussion, and Conservatives have been leading the charge on violent crime reduction discussions in this House for years. We have been talking about bail reform for a very long time. And just now, in the past few months, that the premiers have sounded the alarm. Again, premiers from every political party have written multiple letters to the Prime Minister demanding bail reform. Police forces from across the country, every police force across the country that I've talked to, says we need bail reform. There's also issues with parole, people getting out early on parole. There's also issues with conditional sentencing, people giving house arrest instead of jail time, and not following that house arrest and going out and creating more mayhem for people in their community. So all of this, and I did congratulate the new Minister of Justice for his new role. That's a very important role in Canadian society. He is tasked with the criminal code. He alone is responsible, in addition to his boss, the Prime Minister, for fixing these problems. What concerned me, though, is mere days into being appointed, unfortunately, he was quoted in Reuters. He said he believed that, quote, empirically it's unlikely that Canadians are becoming less safe. Those are his words. I asked him about it today. He seemed to backtrack. But again, that was his initial position, Mr. Speaker. So how do we trust the Liberal government, given this is their record, given they've made no moves until very recently to make any changes because of public pressure, and because pressure from the premiers and pressure from police? Everybody and their dog is asking for bail reform, tough on crime measures. Now they're doing something. They're bringing forward a small bill, about 7 pages, to fix a problem that was created by a bill that was over 200 pages, Bill C-75 from a few years ago. That was a Liberal bill that made it easier to get bail, bottom line, about 5 years ago. Now they brought forward a piddly little 7-page bill that they're telling Canadians will solve all the problems. Well, I don't believe them, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe them. I believe the minister's words when he said he didn't really believe there was a lot of crime going on. Again, I'm paraphrasing. They sort of downplayed the concerns of Canadians. I've read you the stats. I've read you the stories. Clearly there's a problem. But I think there's no way we're going to solve this problem unless we have a change of government.
Here, here.
Conservatives have a proven track record of reducing crime in this country. Proven. It's in the data. The Liberal approach has failed. People are being harmed as a result. We have a Justice Minister who right out of the gate downplayed these concerns, again, making it seem like it's all in our heads. And I'll quote from the National Post. Adam Zivo wrote about this recently. I think it'll just sum it up really well, Mr. Speaker. He said, Canadians deserve political leaders who don't gaslight them about violence in their communities. If the Liberals want to tackle this issue half-heartedly and do only the bare minimum needed to temper public anger, then that's their choice, but it will be the end of them. I very much agree with Mr. Zivo, Mr. Speaker, but I would hope that we can see much more effort to address public safety in the remaining days of this government. But if not, this side of the House is ready and waiting to get to work, roll up our sleeves, and clean up our streets, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for her contribution to today's debate, for her contributions in this chamber in advancing public safety. I appreciate she is committed to public safety. I appreciate she comes from Manitoba. The Manitoba's Justice Minister, Kelvin Gertsen, has said himself, and I'm quoting, that the bill appears to be, quote, hitting a lot of the themes that ministers were concerned about at the recent federal provincial territorial meeting. So we've got the Justice Minister in her home province aligned with the sentiments she just expressed. Her leader, the official leader of His Majesty's official opposition, said this summer, literally 1 month ago today, that he's ready to do this bill and get it passed by midnight as soon as Parliament is back. Mr. Speaker, my question to her is simple. Parliament is back. We are ready to sit to midnight. Are the Conservatives going to support us in getting this bill off to the Senate? Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan and St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, it's very important that even if the Liberals are going to give us an inch when we need miles of reform on public safety, that we move forward with that small pittance that they're providing us in this bill. That's very important. But I would say what Bill C-48 is not is bail reform, which is what every premier, every police force, every justice minister provincially, civic leaders, that's what they're asking for. Not tweaks on the margins. They're asking for broad bail reform. What they're proposing today is not that, Mr. Speaker. And I will just draw the minister's attention to the fact that there is a consistent theme of going soft on criminals from this Liberal government over the last number of years. It's not just Bill C-75 that made it easy to get bail. It's Bill C-5 that removed mandatory minimums for violent gun offenses that, allowed and permitted more house arrests for rapists. It's Bill C-83 that allowed mass murderers like Paul Bernardo to be transferred to medium security prisons. This is a theme, a perspective that they bring to the table that has resulted in more violent crime, and that will not be solved by measly 7-page Bill C-48, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her speech. Now, obviously, I'd like to ask her, because there's an aspect of this bill that I think needs to be studied, which could be good and which has been asked for by a number of women's groups on this issue, because in this bill, there is indeed the reverse onus when it comes to violence towards intimate partners to ensure that that's applied to the accused. Now, Mr. Speaker, in Quebec, there's been a report that was published on rebuilding confidence and rebuilding confidence in the justice system. Well, this bill, with this particular provision, when it comes to crimes against intimate partners, would this not be a good start to say that we do have a bill that is making an important first step? The Honourable Member for Kildonan and St. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for her question. Certainly, aspects of this bill need to be studied to ensure that they are effective. Certainly, anything in regards to violence against women should be paid special attention to. As I've said, sexual assault since the Liberals formed government 8 years ago is up 71%. What I would kindly remind the Bloc Québécois, however, is they supported Bill C-5, as I just mentioned, which removed mandatory prison time. This passed in the fall under the former Justice Minister. Removed mandatory prison time for a number of dangerous gun offenses. It also facilitated more house arrests for rapists. And in Quebec alone, there's been 5 cases of convicted rapists who have not served 1 day in prison. Instead, they are serving house arrest. They get to be in the comforts of their homes after violating women in the most horrific way. The Bloc Québécois supported that. The Quebec National Assembly has called on this House to review that and undo the harm. We are the only party that did not support Bill C-5. I'm wondering if the Bloc Québécois regrets their decision to support it.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The Honourable Member for Esquimalt Senate Souk.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm a bit perplexed by the member from Kildonan St. Paul's speech. We have a bill before us today which has broad support from premiers who demanded action. It's had broad support, I think, from all political parties, with her own party leader saying that he was prepared to pass it on this first day of the sitting. And so what we heard in the speech was some mixing up of things that have nothing to do with bail reform, that have to do with other parts of the justice system. And we have a disparaging of this bill, which has broad support from police and other members in the law enforcement community. And so my question to the member is the Conservative Party serious or not? Are they standing by their members, their leader's statement that they'd like to get this done expeditiously or not?
The Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, with my remaining seconds, it's difficult for me to take questions from the NDP seriously when they have supported every step of the way the Liberal government's soft on crime approach. The reason we are here is because of their they don't like the government's approach, they shouldn't vote for them anymore. We can go to an election today.